Hi everyone, I'm Dan from JazzComposersPresent.com, an online space where composers, musicians, and listeners come together to celebrate the music we love. I'm joined today by Ed Partyka, trombonist, composer, conductor, and longtime member of the Bob Brookmeyer New Art Orchestra. Ed is here to show us how to rethink instrumentation and orchestration in the jazz orchestra.
Hi. Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here, coming to you from Oulu, Finland, very far in the north of Finland, but it's great to be here. Yeah, thinking about orchestration and instrumentation as a compositional tool, something that's always fascinated me. And when I was young and starting to listen to a lot of great big bands, one of the things that always sort of caught my ear, and one of the things I was fascinated with, was the fact that each of the historically important jazz orchestras or big bands, they have their own unique sound, and very often this sound was instantly identifiable. And of course, the sound of an ensemble comes from the players, soloists, the writers, definitely, arrangers and composers, as well as the band leader. But another element that I think has maybe gotten a bit we've lost a little bit is the fact that each of these historically important jazz orchestras had a very unique instrumentation. Duke Ellington, for example, the fact that he had wonderful clarinet doublers in the saxophone section, his trombone section with only 3 trombones, no guitar, as opposed to Count Basie, of course, with the historically important rhythm guitar of Freddie Green, and 4 trombones in the section. And then, of course, the sound of doublings there with the woodwinds, flutes. So of course, a very, very different sound. Stan Kenton with his 10 brass, and in later years, 14 brass. The fact that in the 60s and 70s, he lowered sort of the range of the saxophone section, having his 5-person saxophone section with alto, 2 tenors, baritone, and bass saxophone. And as I mentioned, with the 10 brass, sometimes 2 bass trombones, or the 5th trombone doubling on tuba. Woody Herman's band, no alto saxophones, only 3 tenors and a bari, 3 trombones, but 5 trumpets. And of course, one of my favorite bands, Rob McConnell, mallet percussion, 2 French horns. So once again, each of these bands, they had a very unique instrumentation. And it also seems like in the 1950s, Gil Evans was doing such incredible visionary work and expanding the instrumentation and orchestration of the jazz orchestra. And it seems like maybe we could, revisit his music and his concepts a little bit when we're thinking about instrumentation and orchestration in the 21st century. Creating a unique and individual sound is also one of the things I talk about with my students. A lot of my students, when they start their first ensemble, we talk about, hey, how is your ensemble, how is your band going to sound different to other bands? And of course, a lot of people are moving in the direction of a large ensemble. So having an ensemble of 10 to 15 people, 16, maybe more, but with non-traditional jazz instruments involved. And this also very often fits nicely with the way that jazz is evolving in the 21st century, especially here in Europe. We're seeing and we're hearing much less swing. We're hearing and seeing much less traditional 4-part jazz harmony. A lot more things are triad-based. We're getting away from 2-5-1 progressions, so more modal, more pop, sort of singer-songwriter harmonies. And this fits extremely well for large ensembles. Also something we need to remember is that the standard jazz orchestra instrumentation, 5-4-4, was developed alongside or evolved alongside with jazz harmony. So if we want a homogeneous sound on a 4-part jazz voicing or 5-part jazz voicing, of course the jazz orchestra is great. But if we're thinking about triad-based music, then maybe we don't need a complete trombone section in the traditional fashion or a trumpet section. So these are some of the things that I've been thinking about over the last few years, and especially the way it impacts the development of my own Ed Partyka Jazz Orchestra. When I started the band in 2007, it was basically trombone section, trumpet section, sax section. But over the years, that's also been evolving. Maybe we could take a look at the slide, which shows the instrumentation of my jazz orchestra and also the setup, because this is also something I take into account. So as we can see, we have trumpet section, trombone section, or low brass section, and reed section. My reeds have also, in the fashion of Stan Kenton, they've sort of migrated lower. I do have 2 altos, a tenor, and 2 baritone saxophones. That's the normal saxophone section. But as you can see there, they all double on quite a lot of instruments. and especially reeds 4 and 5 have now really become sort of bass clarinet and reed 5 contrabass clarinet with bass saxophone. So sort of my saxophone section is divided into the high reeds and the low reeds. My low brass, the fourth bass trombone, is also now become about 80% tuba. Third trombone is a bass trombone, and I have a French horn. So I can also have actually a 4 trombone section, but I can also divide my low brass into a low brass duo and sort of an upper brass trio. My trumpets also, 5 trumpets, but 4 and 5, trumpets 4 and 5 also do a heck of a lot of flugelhorn doubling. So this is also one of the groups I use within the bands. I have 2 flugelhorns and a French horn. That sort of creates a trio of instruments. I can have my French horn with my 2 tenor trombones. That creates a trio of instruments. Or another mid-level trio that I use is horn, second trombone, and tenor saxophone, which is reed 3. So once again, thinking about where this is in the room, where it's set up. Then I have my top 3 trumpets. And, so once again, I have just sort of within these 3 sections, I can have up to 6 or maybe even more different smaller sections. So this is sort of how the music's been evolving, at least with my band. And of course, I don't want to go away from entirely traditional instrumentation and going in the direction of a large ensemble, because I do sometimes want that sound of the full orchestra. And a lot of the music we do play is sort of traditional harmony. But recently, as I mentioned, what's sort of been happening the last couple of years is I've been doing more arranging for my vocalist. And my vocalist, Julia Oschewsky, she's a great composer, but she's a singer-songwriter. She's not a traditional jazz composer. So her music is also triad-based, a lot of even eighth things. So when I think about these sections within the section, they give me more textures, colors, and timbres, and also more layers. I also think of this low group of instruments, the reeds 4 and 5, trombones 3 and 4, as an independent entity, often operating not together with the bass or with the rhythm section. So once again, these are some things that I've been thinking about, and also doing a lot of doubling to increase the textures, the colors, the timbres that I have available. So the audio example we're going to listen to, this is something new. It's a composition from Julia Oschewsky called Isabelle. I did the arrangement, and it's going to be released later this year on our next album. And, so you saw groups of 3 instruments, 3 soprano saxophones in this case, 3 Harmon trumpets, and then the horn and 2 bucket trombones, all doubling the same lines. And that's also one of the things that I sort of took with me from Brookmeyer, and also one of the things I love about Gil Evans, how they get these wonderful combined textures by doubling different sections, different instruments. And then as you also notice, the bass group is really operating totally independently with this melodic line, actually, down to contra D with the contrabass clarinet, and staying away from the rhythm section ostinato, which is in the middle register. And then the backgrounds behind the vocals, 3 sopranos, flugelhorns, and horn. It's a light, sort of very thin sound, and it's above the vocals. But if you might have noticed, those of you who have worked with the Brookmeyer white note exercise, the white note exercise is great for writing melodic material and backgrounds in a pop singer-songwriter sort of harmonic environment. So that's also one of the things that I, taking some of these Brookmeyer techniques, putting them into this sort of music. Later in the arrangement, there are moments of tutti, when the entire orchestra is playing, big, thick voicings. And that's, one of the advantages that I have with the jazz orchestra, as opposed to maybe a large ensemble. So when I need the sound of the full orchestra, I have it. But in the meantime, dividing things up and combining. And this is nothing new. I mean, as I mentioned, Duke Ellington did it, Gil Evans did it, and it's just something that I like to think about these days. And once again, it sort of contributes to the unique and individual sound of my orchestra. So maybe that's give you some food for thought for some ways to orchestrate and use instrumentation and orchestration with your big band jazz orchestra as a compositional tool. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching today's mini lesson. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Drop any questions, comments, or suggestions for future videos in the comment section down below. To watch our full-length events and participate in live Q&As with our presenting artists, head over to jazzcomposerspresent.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.